So you're looking to flip houses in this insane market. Well, in this episode of RVA Real Estate Talk, we are going to dive into just how to get into the flipping business. Let's go.
You're listening to RVA Real Estate Talk with Jared Davis and Galen Parker, your source for an honest, insightful look into Central Virginia's real estate market. Combined, Jared and Galen have over 20 years of experience in real estate, as well as hundreds of testimonials from clients past and present who rely on them for advice and assistance buying and selling a home in today's incredibly hot and competitive housing market. And now, your hosts, Jared Davis and Galen Parker.
That's right. I am Jared Davis.
And I am still Galen Parker.
And this market is still incredibly hot.
Super hot.
How's it been going for you out there?
It's not bad. I mean, there have been some dark days, I'll be honest with you. There have been some...
Any suicides this week?
I have not. I've held it together. My clients have held it together. Well, my client who was closest to the edge. Don't push me because I'm close to the edge. Here's what they've been doing. So internet lead came in December, I think it said 12th. I think I told the team 12th or 17th. They came in. They live in DC. So almost every weekend they had been driving back and forth. Like they'd come down Saturday morning. We hit the houses. I mean, we were seeing like 4, sometimes 6 houses
at a time. That you just start forgetting everything about it by the time.
Yeah, they were like, "Hey, you remember that house 2 weeks ago?" I'm like, "Well, it doesn't matter. It's sold already." They were coming down, looking at multiple houses. We were putting like 4 or 5 offers in. They finally ratified one yesterday. So hopefully the carousel is over for them. It's an awesome looking house. They're a super unique couple. So I think
it doesn't come back to market.
Exactly.
Can you imagine like if it just doesn't work out and then you gotta keep looking again?
Why would you even say that?
That's the worst.
Yeah, I mean, that would be very, very tough. So we're going to do whatever we can to make sure that thing holds together because I know he doesn't want to. And he's got like a lease that's going to be up soon. So it's like they're getting close to that where we need to lock something down. And I'm glad they found out a house that was like as unique as they are because they're super unique. And this house is like very cool. One of the things that, obviously I can say this was, I'm not saying any names, but like one of the things I think that helped them is like the pictures on the house were not done very well.
Oh, yeah.
And I thought that was like so funny to me. I was like looking at the pictures and I'm like, these are like, it was clearly like camera phone, kind of dark. Like someone used like a blur, so you can see some things were blurred.
Like the agent in the mirror.
Yeah, I mean, almost. You can see it's like they definitely didn't hire a professional professional real estate photography, which I definitely tell people to do so. They didn't do that, and I think that definitely hurt because I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, this is not good. And like one of the rooms, they took a picture. It looks like kind of small. So I thought it was like a small room. And then I went in when we were doing the house. It's massive. It's like almost like an auditorium. And I was like, how in the world did you mess this up? Like everyone was surprised when they saw it. They're like, what? What is this room? I'm like, this tiny room in the picture because she like had like a little angle and she's like, click, click. So,
well, they probably think, the market's hot. They don't have to do anything. And then look what happens.
Look how it hurts you. I always tell people, go professional. Do not skimp. You will be remembered by that work.
Yes, definitely.
Your body of work will be remembered. So that's what's happening with me. What's happening to you, big dog?
Well, I bought 2 flips this past week.
Very excited.
Well, I closed on 1 flip, 1 in Bon Air, and then we've got 1 under contract in Woodlake. We had sold that house with the pool in Woodlake, and it went for tons over asking price. So we thought, well, let's buy another house in Woodlake with the pool because obviously we know the market now. So we got that one. And then Lakeside, if anybody wants to flip in Lakeside, I've got one on Greenway that's been my nightmare for like the last 5 months. That one is finally getting to a point where it should start looking like a house.
Nice.
We ordered our mechanicals yesterday, our electrical inspection, our veneer inspection.
All right.
We got our footing inspection approved.
We had some inspection issues with that house, I guess if you could say. We had some nightmares there.
I am looking like a flunking student if you look up the Henrico page on this permit. I mean, it is just fail, 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 fail. And most of the time, it's not even like our fault. Like sometimes you're like, man, am I just bad at this? But there's times where we've ordered permits. I mean, like last week I ordered 2 inspections. One guy went out on a Tuesday, failed it, and said no lockbox code, automatic fail, because you didn't like put the code in when you ordered the thing. But like a lot of counties will call you when they're on the way to the house, you know what I mean, let you know they're coming. So they're just like, oh, we came, no one was there, you didn't give us a code, fail. They've got my number in my email and a note that says, hey, if you need anything, here's my cell, call me.
Fail.
So then I have to order them back out. And then, they came out again. Somebody else didn't go into the crawl to look at the fixed stuff, so then they failed it again. And I was like, man, I know it's not like exactly per the plan, but this is exactly how the mason said to do it. And so I was like, I'll send you another picture. And then I gave him the picture. He's like, oh, that's fine. And then and I'm like, All of these things could
It was
probably
funny,
just be passed.
like we were talking to that guy. He seemed like such a normal, reasonable person. I was like, thankfully, this guy sounds pretty.
Was it the one guy I called as the best guy I've ever talked to from?
Like, oh yes,
and he met me over last week. Like much to my thanks, he was like, "Oh, I'll just meet you there." And we went through like everything. And I was like, "Look, I know I'm not doing framing today, but can you look at the framing and just tell me what's gonna fail right now so that
pass?
I can, you know what I mean? Like, can we just have this conversation so you don't have to come out 5 times this week?" So it's been, and then I had like a broken window. I had to fix that yesterday. It took me like 3 hours of Home Depot trips to try to get a new window sash in there. So yeah, and we sold a bunch of houses. Sold my sister house. Elmer was writing, you were writing, Steve was writing. We probably ratified a couple million.
We got a lot of stuff ratified this weekend.
10 offers on the one on Chalkley, I think. So yeah,
we definitely ratified over 1 million this weekend.
No, we ratified like 1 million. Easy, like maybe Sunday we probably did closer to 2 or 3, honestly.
So it was a good weekend. It's a grind, man.
Man, is it a grind.
But that's what me and Jared are here for.
What else were we going to talk about? There was something before the deep dive, and I can't remember now. But we're going to Texas.
Oh yeah, that's a big one. We're going to go see Banana Hands.
Hey, that's a.k.a. Tony Robbins. I don't even know who Tony Robbins is, but me and Galen are going on a little vacation.
No, it's a work trip. Don't tell people. There's other people like, you guys going on vacation together? Like, no.
It's 100% a work expense, but there's pools involved. There's gonna be barbecue. There's gonna be steak, probably some tacos.
I feel sorry for all the cows that are about to really take a nosedive when Jared and Galen come to Dallas, Texas, August.
The red meat and in my body for that week.
I think someone needs to buy a cowboy hat or take a picture and.
That is that's not my thing. Galen could maybe rock it.
Oh, I think so.
Don't you love those people that like wear cowboy boots and cowboy hats and like they act like they're cowboys but they have nothing to do with being a cowboy?
Oh yeah, I'm like, what do you do from? Oh yeah, I'm a tax accountant.
I'm a IT tech.
I'm like, that's like the guys who do like ride the motorcycles.
I was just about to say that.
They're on the chopper, like, dude. I'm like, hey man, what do you guys? You like Mongolians? You Hell's Angels? They're like, no, I work at Progressive Insurance. I'm like, what?
They don't shave on Thursday, so Saturday have a scruff on.
Born to be. Yeah, I love that. Like they're like they park at like random like lots and like just all hanging out. Like, yeah, this is
Starbucks,
brother. Yeah,
Starbucks.
Yeah, it's like checking their cell phones. Like, my stocks are killing it right now, brother. I'm like, all right, cool.
Yeah, so Texas is going to be up.
I'm excited. I'm actually super excited. I'm not excited for the near temperatures of the sun that we're going to experience.
I am, because there's going to be pools.
But that's true.
Have you flown since the pandemic?
Nope.
No.
It's annoying wearing a mask until you go through the air. I just did it. It's annoying.
I actually like the idea of wearing. I would almost advocate wearing a mask anytime I'm in airports. Like, I spend a lot of times in airports and they're filthy.
But pre-COVID, there was like this kid vomiting in the floor at the airport in
I
like
wish
Hong
he had
Kong.
a mask on.
This is like before everything happened, but it's gonna be good. I mean, it's 3 hours. It's like a direct flight.
I'm gonna get the Bane mask, like the one he was wearing when he was like in the Batman when he was on the plane.
Yeah,
I'm gonna wear that one.
Well, the weird thing is now when you leave the plane, you can't get up until your row is ready.
I like that.
So everyone kind of, which is kind of nice because before it would be kind of rude, you know,
hectic. Everybody trying to push out,
pushing all that. So now you just kind of chill out for a minute.
Honestly, I hated that aspect of it because there was always inevitably for me. There's like a little old lady in front of me, and I'm just like, please don't stay. Then like some guy would be like, and he's like, she's like falling over, and she's like, can you help me with my bag? And he's like, go die. And I'm like, I got it, don't worry. So now I'm like, I love order. I love orderly.
Yeah, it should be that way when it goes.
Super quick flight. We're gonna get there in the morning.
I got us first class.
We're gonna land.
I'm just kidding. I didn't get his first class.
I was like looking at that. I was like, expenses? What?
It's definitely economy.
That's the two yin and yang of Jared and Dave. I was like, I didn't even get excited when you said that. I was just like,
he's like, why would you do that?
I was just like,
he's like, it's 3 hours.
What are you talking about?
Do you know how many tacos we can buy with that extra
Do you have any cancellation headphones and all that?
I mean, I have like normal earbuds and stuff.
Well, how are we supposed to talk to each other if we can't hear each other?
We share Bud. We're gonna watch the same movie together.
We're gonna film the podcast on the plane. Awesome. Here we are, Galen and Jared at the Dave's group taking up. We're coming to you from 30,000 feet in the air. And just like, we're like, what are these idiots? Sit down, sir.
All right,
I'm excited.
Are we ready for deep dive?
I'm so ready for that deep dive.
All right, let's hear it, Mike. Deep dive. We used to just pause for a second. We'd have our little deep dive. Now we pause for 10 minutes.
It's a concert.
So let's go. This is peaceful. All right. I like it. It faded right this time. I could hear it fade.
Nice. I was about to drop a sick freestyle on that thing. Glad we cut it off.
Well, I like that one. All right. So deep dive today. What are we talking about?
So you want to flip a house. I feel like we have that conversation a lot, not just with people, but with other agents. Oftentimes when we bring agents on the team, we say like, hey, what's your 2-year, 5-year, 10-year goal? A lot of people say, I would like to get into flipping, which is an awesome avenue. But we do want to just kind of make sure that they understand what they're up against. It can be extremely rewarding, gratifying. It can also destroy your life.
At least 5 times a week, people call me, whether it's a internet cold call lead, right? We get a lot of those random leads that are like, write a cash offer on this right now. And those are like these weird investment leads. We get realtors. Yeah, I probably hear from at least 2 or 3 realtors a week. One realtor called me the other day while I was in an appointment. I answered a bunch of questions for him. If you know who you are, it's nothing against you. You can call me anytime. I love you. But it's just funny because the guy's like, oh, is that like one of your agents? And I was like, no, just another random realtor I have nothing to do with. He just called me for help because he knows we flip. So it's either realtors, random, just internet lead clients.
We're happy to help.
And then, long-term investors, obviously, that you hear from. But ultimately, we just have this conversation so much. We just figured we'd spend, next 20, 30 minutes just breaking down what it really takes if you're going to start getting into flipping houses.
So to start, let's first define. Jared, what is your definition of flipping?
Well, so if you watched our podcast, I want to say 1 or 2 podcasts ago, we had done like a 101 to like rentals.
Yep.
And we had kind of talked about turning over some rentals and fixing them up if necessary. But in this sense, we're just talking about purchasing to fix up and then resell immediately. So we're just reselling for profit. This is not a podcast on rentals. This is not a portfolio build. This is, hey, I want to make some side cash. I want to get into this as a legit business, or I need these chunks of cash to go towards whatever
something
investments, life. Maybe they want to live, beyond their means. I don't know. Whatever you want the cash for.
I was looking at the one of the definitions. So it's a wholesale investing strategy that people put in place that focuses on buying low, selling high. But as you mentioned, it's about speed, where, rentals, that's kind of like a maximize your profit long term, where with flipping, that's not, you want to make as much, but it's not going to maximize your profit the way rentals will. But it's all about like getting it done quick, and then moving on to the next one. To the next one.
Yep. Now, do you have a guide? Are you going to guide me? Or
I'm totally going to guide you.
You're
I'm going to be your guide. I'm going to go with a guide you.
Oh, God.
I've been guiding you for years.
I don't know what that means.
It's buy in a hot neighborhood, buy low, sell high. It's the opposite of buy and hold, which we talked about. So one of the things I was thinking about when we were talking about like this topic for over the past couple of weeks as we were preparing for this podcast, I told you, I said, what about the as seen on TV? Because that's kind of, to me, for a lot of people, that's what started it for them.
HGTV.
Oh, yeah. And there's good and there's bad. There's good and there's bad. Let's not say that it's all bad, but there's good. I mean, just think about this.
It's not all bad. It's just all fake.
Yeah, it's all fake. Think about this.
It's not real.
You got flip or flop. Mm-hmm. You got Masters of Flip, Flip This House, Flip Men, Beach Flip, and then I just wrote anything on HGTV, and then I put Joanna and Chip Gaines. I put a star next to that one because I love them.
Okay.
Because I love them so
you
much.
Like it.
They have the
Mike's trying to
talk
talk
about
about
He's trying to get
network
in.
now.
I mean, they're on top of the mountain. So
good for them.
So let's talk first. What's the bad with HGTV? It should be obvious. But what's the bad?
Well, almost everything is staged, right? Like if you watch like House Hunters, like these people have already bought their house. They're going to look at houses. Like the furniture in the house is like their house most of the time, right? Nothing against it. People get excited, but then like when they find out that these people have already bought this house, it's kind of like a letdown. Yeah. Well, when you think about that, you're getting to see the process. But on the flip shows, it's the same principle. It's not that there's not some process going on, but they always have to have a problem that they encounter, so they got to film that and show how we can fix
it's
this
not
stuff.
Directly on the beach.
Yeah, and then they got to have like the ups, and then it's
emotional roller coaster. They got to create the drama.
Everything's glorified. They also do so many things that are like shabby chic, and there's always like a custom designer involved, I feel like, when in reality it's like, most people aren't going to be fully furnishing their houses, or they're going to be hiring a stager to do that part.
Yep.
So there's like a lot of extra stuffs and fluff that aren't really needed, but they're trying to, show off how pretty this house can be, so obviously it's in there. But ultimately, I think people should realize that there's almost always going to be a nightmare involved in your flip. You know, I'm not saying that some of them aren't easy. Some of them I look back on, I'm like, man, I turned that house over in 2 weeks and we put it back on and we sold it. We
Smoke Tree wasn't that bad.
Smoke Tree was okay. So that Smoke Tree was beautiful, right?
Right.
Turned out amazing, but like just some things for Smoke Tree, right? My framer framed. This was a house that we built.
That's right.
We built the upstairs out. It was just an attic, so we purchased it. It was a colonial. We framed it out. The framer framed everything, and he was supposed to be hanging the doors, doing anything wood related, and then we get to like the windows because the windows had no trim, right? Because we had to drywall everything, and then he's like, "Oh, well, I didn't include like trimming your windows out."
Yep.
But I'm like, why? Why would I hire a different framer, wood guy, carpenter?
So you want your competitor to come in and work with me? Is
right?
that what you want?
That makes absolutely no sense, right? No, that's not a problem as much as it's like, well, why didn't you just quote this? But that goes, God, maybe it's a framer thing. Because then you got Greenway, which the guy framed wrong, and then was like, well, that's not what we talked about. And I'm like, well, you can't get into the bedroom upstairs right now because you framed it 4 feet in instead of framing it to the edge of the house. So even if that isn't what we talked about, when this happened, you probably should have called me and been like, this doesn't really work, right?
That's like a firefighter is like, well, you didn't say I had to put out all of the fire.
Yeah, I mean,
the fire was downstairs. I put the fire upstairs has nothing to do. It's like, well, I mean,
you're the expert.
Didn't you see?
So, that's point. Before I just forget this, remember that even though you look at these guys and you're like, they're the expert. They're supposed to tell me how to do this. That is not the case. Ever, almost. It is almost always like you better either have a project manager that knows what they're doing or you better be there and know what you're doing, because most of the time you're looking at the plans that your guy drew up if you hired an architect or whoever you hired, and you're like, this is what needs to go here and this is how you do this and this is what we want for the plumbing. And you expect, because so many new investors are just like, hey, well, can you give me a number for a contractor that can go out and just give me a price to do everything?
Beautiful. Yeah.
And it's like, not really. No one wants to come out to your house and quote it before you own it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, I'm thinking about putting an offer on 9 houses. Can you drive to all 9 and
tell me how
exactly?
much it would cost to?
And that's like right there. If you're a new flipper, like you need to learn what stuff costs yourself.
Sure.
And if you've never done it before, that can be tough. That's why you deal with people like me and Galen, or you have some other flippers or partners that do know. But it's unrealistic that you're going to go get a bunch of quotes before you ever purchase a house.
And this kind of like ties in, before we conclude, just the phenomenon of as seen on TV. I always think, like, when you look at those shows, they never show you any of this. It's always very simple. They're like, oh, what are we going to do? Well, this house needs to. This
guy's
paint.
like, well, this wall's going to get knocked down in the kitchen. And then they do all like those architect sketches, like in computer things. And then they're like,
fast forward.
After.
Yeah,
and you're like, what? And you're like,
they might have one issue because they can't find the right brick that they needed.
Yeah. It's like, what about where that whole section was just rotted away and eaten by termites?
Oh, I had to rebuild the entire back of chapel the other day and all of the beams. So all the wood floors had to come up. I didn't get to save any. I had to put new beams across the entire back. I had to level everything because it wasn't level. And I had to relay all new subfloor.
So that is the danger that you have, asset. They make it seem too easy.
Yeah.
For sure, you want to kind of give people, you only got 30 minutes, but you want to kind of make sure that people are enjoying the program. But I always think that that's like the big fallacy. And we'll talk a little bit more in this next topic about, like, make sure you have a project manager or someone who has a know-how. Because I thought about how many times do we look on the news and hear about, like, celebrities, musicians, athletes, retired athletes, where they all like lost $0.7 billion in trying to flip houses. And I was like, what went wrong? What would you guess? And I think you touched on it. What went wrong with them?
It just wasn't their thing.
Yeah.
They thought they could get in, didn't work out. And not everybody's going to be successful at it. I mean, we sell flips for people sometimes, and I walk in, I'm like, man, they really could have just spent a little bit more money on some lighting, or man, they got these paint colors wrong, or man, this was the tile they chose. So
yeah, I think a lot of times when you look at theirs, it's like they are trying to create something that's like, you don't really need to do that to, like, you're like, if you just like change the floor and the paint and maybe move this wall. But they're like, so what we're gonna do is we're gonna make heated floors through that entire house. The whole house will have Wi-Fi and there's a hot tub in each bedroom. It's like, oh, who gave you this idea? Who gave you this advice? So
that's a good point you make, though, because you have some people that take way too much to the extreme and they put way too much into a flip. But then you have the people that do way too little too. Like you have the people that just cheap out and they put cheap, plumbing in as far as like fixtures and stuff goes, or they'll do really cheap tile or it doesn't match. Or they're like, I saved money on the paint. So I bought like the color that was on remnant that someone didn't want. You know what I mean? Like you get all this stuff and you're like, dude, if you'd just spent maybe an extra $1,000 on lighting or paint, like this house would have looked totally different.
I think the big one that I always see when I go in houses is like everything's like all nice and done. Like they go to the kitchen and it's like the countertops are just like, I'm like, you didn't go like any stone.
Depending on the price point, a lot of people will like cheap out and a cheaper price point. But granite's so cheap now.
Yeah, I know. I was like, you're so close.
You can do laminate for maybe $400, $500, $600 in material, and granite's going to be like $1,200, $1,300. It's kind of like.
I'm like, you're getting that back.
Just do the granite.
Yeah, I was like,
I put it in our apartments most of the time. Like if it's a rental, a lot of times I'll put granite in. Now towards the end of our house whatever, we started not doing granite to save a little bit of money. But for the most part, we put granite even in the rentals.
I was looking at so they failed to take into consideration mortgage, utilities, property tax, insurance, and hard money. Jerry, what is the? I know the answer, and Mike probably he's talked to us long enough. But give the listeners what's the issue with the hard money?
So, a couple issues. It's not an issue. A lot
what
of people
do you have to be aware of? Yeah.
A lot of people want to flip, but then they don't have the cash. So the first thing they do is they think, well, let me go talk to a bank. But then a normal bank is like, I'm not going to loan money on this house, right? It's disheveled. You can't get a normal loan on it. It's got to be some kind of reno loan. Then there's a whole nother slew of issues with that. So then they're like, oh, well, I'll go get hard money. So hard money is just non-institutional money. It's not from a bank. It's from private investors. And typically it's just a high interest rate. So your average rates right this second are probably like 10% annual interest-only payments, and then maybe you pay like 1 or 2% up front at close. So the issue comes in is, one, you've got to factor all that into your numbers. If you spend $200,000, right, that's a $2,000 interest-only payment. So if you think you can flip your house in 2 or 3 months, maybe that's not that big of a deal to spend $4 or $6 on that money, plus maybe the points up front, maybe you're for 8 to 10. The issue, though, is that if you're pulling a bunch of permits and things like that, I mean, depending on where you're at, a build permit could take you 6 to 9, 10 weeks to get, right? So if you're waiting for 2 months or 3 months before you can even start work, you're paying those hard money payments. So, or you could hit snags, you know what I mean? Just in general, maybe you thought it was going to be a 3-month, 4-month job. It turns into a 6, 7, 8, 9-month job. And now you're, $12,000, $13,000, $14,000 out in hard money fees. So,
I think that's a big one. I looked at
and I've had it happen.
I was looking at this happens to like a lot of celebrities because they don't have like industry knowledge. Just because you're a good baseball player, basketball player, golfer doesn't mean you've got money. Doesn't mean you have knowledge. Or poor Nelly. Come on, Nelly. It is hiding. But I was looking at this one. Steph Curry, he bought a house for $3.2 million.
Okay.
Invested $500,000.
Okay.
He put it back on the market for $3.7 million.
That doesn't seem profitable.
And he sold it for $3.1 million. So he bought it for 3.2, sold it for 3.1.
Wow.
And it was just because it was like timing, and it was like, that happens a lot because, one, should you really be flipping something that big? Probably not.
Maybe give Steve Curry his money, but not us.
Yeah, exactly. I was like, he lost some money. Then the other one was like Michael Jordan. He bought one of his properties, $29 million. He bought it for I think like $26 million.
Was this one he lived in though?
Yeah, and then he was like fixing it up to fixing it up to sell. And it was a short. He hadn't been there for a long time. He bought it for like $26 million. He did a bunch of fixes, couldn't sell it. He was trying to sell it for $29 million. He ended up dropping it to like $14 million after buying it for $26. And guess what? Still hasn't sold it.
Wow.
And he's been trying to sell it for years. I'm like, that has got to be an absolute nightmare. I guess granted, yes, you got Michael Jordan.
Michael Jordan is a billionaire.
You don't want, I was like, that still stings.
No, you're right. Yeah. So, I mean, know your numbers and know what your costs are going to be. Because you're right. People don't take into account just the little things like the utilities and the insurance. And, I mean, hard money is not a little thing. So, obviously, if you're paying hard money, you got to think about that. But then you also have to think, if you're pulling hard money and you pull your reno cost, what if you go over your reno cost? Do you have the cash to actually
make up the difference?
Because if you don't, then they can come take your house. And then if you're cash and you go over your budget, again, same principle applies. Do you have the cash to be able to float the difference? So I mean, and you're almost always going to go over. I have an overage of 10% that I just factor into everything because I just figure.
And sometimes that's not enough.
Sometimes it's not enough. I mean, Rosewood last year, that one took us 10 months.
That's what I was thinking about, like the floor. You're like, hey, you got to replace all of the floors.
That one was another one. I had to replace all of the joists. Yeah, so that was supposed to be, I think, like a $45,000 or $50,000 job, and I think the final total was like close to $90,000.
But it turned out beautiful.
It did turn out beautiful, and we did sell it for $50,000 over my original comp, so we still won. But. Yeah. You can't always plan on that. You know, yeah. I've somehow managed to not lose money on a flip yet. But it's not to say it can't happen. We just bought the one, we're buying the one with the pool. Who knows how that will go because I don't know what's under the pool, right? It's like all the concrete's bad, has to be replaced. I mean, I hope the pool's okay. I hope the systems work. But until you get in it and start messing with it, you're
once you swim in it, you gotta.
Oof, it's like green right now.
So the next thought is like, all right, so we know what's gone. We know what's created this fever of wanting to flip. How can they be successful? I wrote down a couple of things, just some hard, they're not rules, but just things to keep out. I talked about like the 70% rule.
Yeah.
That's
a solid one to start with.
Yeah. I was like, that's not etched in stone, but tell them what is that?
I actually never used the 70% rule going into this. I'm just going to let you explain it because I'm going to.
So, yeah.
I'll give you my method in a second, but I know it. I just, it's funny because it's like everybody's gone by that. And I was like, is that what they do? But
yeah, and it's not like, you don't have to, you don't have to, but it's a good just to kind of wrap your head around the fact that, you look at a house. First, you want to kind of think of what's the after repair, value of the house. So
ARV.
It's like your ARV. So after repair value. The big question, we'll talk about this later, is how do you arrive at that? Like, how does the average person arrive at that? So you're going to need some help from probably a realtor. They'll probably give you that knowledge. So you think about 70%. So you're going to take 70% of that ARV minus your repair costs. You get that number. That's a general of what you would want to pay for the house going in.
That factors like, okay, here's our profit pretty much.
Exactly. And I was like, no, that's not don't email me and be like, oh, I don't use that.
Well, it's a good rule of thumb.
But, yeah,
it's like one a lot of wholesalers will use to like put a price on a house too, because they figure if people are using this and they can get a house under contract at this value, well, technically less their wholesale fee at that 70% rule.
They also have to know their costs, like not just repair, but like all of your costs that's going to go into that.
And wholesalers freaking know your costs. That's the big thing. I get these wholesale deals all the time, and they're like, I'm like, oh, I would lose $20,000 if I flipped this, and they're like, well, what number do you need it to be at? And I'm like, about 60,000 under where you're at now. So there's a lot of wholesalers that have no clue what they're doing.
So are you going to sell it to me for that price I just gave it to you?
Yeah. No, what they're doing is they're like, I got to write this number down so I can go back to the seller and try to like figure out where I messed up. This is what's happening. So for me personally, I just typically go by like a number. I normally just don't want to make less than 40,000 on a flip. So for me, it's like that's kind of the number. Yeah, I will take less if it's like an easy job. If it's something that I know, hey, this is pretty much cosmetic, I can go in, out in a month or so or 6 weeks.
So what you do, I would guess, is you take your ARV minus your 40,000, minus your repair costs, and then arrive to whatever number that you would hope to buy it.
Yeah, so pretty much ARV times taking out the commission, right? For the sales side, I take out the closing costs, I take out all of the repair costs, and then whatever I'm left with, I'm costs. Like, how much do I want to make? Take that out, and then whatever that number is, that's what I'll pay for that house.
Yeah, so that's what we call the Davis Davis rule.
Method.
That's the Davis rule.
And don't get me wrong, if I spend more, then typically I'll want to make more as well. So like Wood Lake, I mean, that one's going to be like a $425,000 flip. So I actually, with the pool, it's kind of an unknown whether we make more, but ultimately, like we did that one, and then we've got one that's a 365 in Bon Air. Those are more expensive flips. So that's one of those things. Like I would like to make 50, 60, something like that. Versus if it's something that's 150 that I pay for a house or 90 on a house, it's a lot less cash out. Yeah, you know what I mean. So I mean, you are looking at cash out versus return. But for me, if it's less than 30 or 40,000, I typically don't want to take it because heck, our last 2 flips, we haven't started on 2 yet, but the 2 that we're on right now have both had $10,000 snafus. So it's kind of like, if you're only $15,000, $20,000 in profit and you just lost half of your profit for an unforeseen thing you didn't know about, then
the extras are like, was all of this worth the $15,000 I'm going to make?
Nope. I could have sold it to an investor and then just sold it when I was done and made my commission, and I would have flipped nothing, right?
Yeah. So these are, and this kind of like lends itself to our next kind of topic of, what's the role of a realtor? It's more of like, what's the role of a realtor and what's the role of just like someone like you or myself, where it's kind of like, someone might have a project or they have an opportunity. I've seen a lot where people are like, hey, my grandmother passed away. I got this house. Should I try to flip it? And like, will I make the most money of flipping it? Is it best for me to just sell it, as is? There's a wholesaler. And I'm like, you might not know the answer in your brain because of the fever that HGTV is. You're going to think like, I'm going to flip this. And it's like, do you have any expertise in flipping it? Do you know what you're going to get for after it's flipped? Like all these things. So.
Yeah, and the price that you're going to pay to just do a one-off is going to be exorbitantly higher than what I pay for stuff.
Economies of scale is, I guess, the correct term.
I put 40 roofs on in the last 2 years. So for me, like I can get a roof for probably $3,000 that someone else is going to pay like $6,000 or $7,000 for. You know what I mean? So it's not that my roof is worse; it's just as good, but I do so many of them.
You're buying in bulk.
Yeah, same thing with kitchens, same thing with floors, same thing with whatever. I mean, we do 6 figures worth of flooring.
That's why I always think it's like, it's such a funny thing. Sometimes you'll talk to someone and they'll say like, oh, I got a guy who will do like my granite. And it's just like, I know you went to high school with him. Yeah. I know he's a solid dude. You see him once a year at Thanksgiving. He's probably not going to beat the price that we're going to get because we're, doing this like, tons of times over and over again, referring people to the same guys. It's like, it just doesn't make sense. But we always get it. We're like, hey, no, don't worry about it. I know someone who can do floors. It's like, all right.
Yeah, I'll give my contractors out sometimes, and then people won't dcall. And I'm like, hey, did you talk to my guy? And they're like, oh, no, I forgot. But I found this other guy. I'm like,
my brother-in-law.
I'm like, what did he charge you? And it's like $3,000 or $4,000 more than I would have paid. I'm like, okay.
And it's not that great. And it's like not a good job. That's my biggest pet peeve.
Or, oh, no, our family can do it. Or my brother, he can come in and do this. And then you come in, you're like, man, that is not...
I was like, does he do this for a living?
Yeah. No, he can rent the equipment from Home Depot.
He did it in college 20 years ago for the summers. I'm like,
yeah, he took a woodworking class in middle school.
Same.
He made one of those like, giant paper clips out of wood. So now he's.
He made one of those little cars. You put like the CO2 cartridges in
there.
What
is the triangles from Cracker Barrel, the peg game? He was a pro.
He made one of those. He made the car. He did the bridge.
Yeah.
Do you want to see how much weight that bridge held up? It's like 2 pounds, man. So I'm like, yeah, that's great. That's great. It's not going to be better than. So what the role of a realtor is, and I wrote down like 3 things that are based on what we talk about. So one, he's going to be able to identify that hot and upcoming neighborhood. How do you do that?
Well, to be fair, I think every neighborhood is viable at this point.
Right now, for sure.
100%. If there was an area that 3 years ago I would not have bought in, I will buy it.
Double down right now.
I will double down and I will buy anything. In fact, those areas are my favorite because like maybe they're still cheap enough where you can get in and get something. So to me, there's really no area. The only thing that I avoid from a flip standpoint would be a neighborhood that has 0 flip comps in it. So if you can find a neighborhood where there's like nothing, no matter how cheap that house is, the problem is there's nothing to base it off of. So someone will take that chance and someone will make some profit and someone will start the area at some point.
Yeah. Do you want to be that first guy?
Not me, because I am not going to guess that I can get 180.
I should be able to. Yeah, it's a tough one.
And then the appraiser comes back and says no, 155 because everything else in here sold for $45,000, right? And you're like, yeah, but look how nice mine is.
It's so nice. So, I agree. It's very nice.
That's about the only thing. But as a realtor, like, man, you guys could waste a lot of your time and clients' time if you don't learn a little bit about this. I just did an entire mastermind on our Level Up Facebook group last week just for investors. Hey, you want to build a portfolio? And it was just for realtors to join.
Yeah.
And there were so many realtors that, it was a lot of info staffed into 30 minutes. But, everybody's like, man, this is good info because it's just stuff you don't really think about a lot of times. But if you're a realtor and you're trying to help these investors, man, your commission isn't just writing up paperwork, right? Your commission is going to come in being a good comp person to be able to say, hey, this is what this thing's going to be worth, right? And if your investor doesn't know how much stuff is going to cost, it's a good thing if you kind of do. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They can't just rely on you. Like one of our agents had a lady that was like looking for flips, and it just seemed like every single house they're like, hey, can you like get your contractors out here and find out how much it's going to, like, well before they would get it under contract or do anything. I'm like, you got to stop doing this. You're going to, do a bunch of work for nothing. That's just not how this whole thing works. Like
they have to have some. If your investor, if we're speaking to you realtors, your investor has to have some sort of knowledge of the game, or you've got to know, because there's not a lot of contractors that like love just driving around, especially right now in this market where like they're just fumbling over businesses. They're
contractors are not doing the work that they've already been paid to do.
Yeah.
Like, that's how backed up they are. So if you think they're just going to go quote some house that you're looking at online, it's not. So that's where you have to start figuring it out. And you've got to give realistic expectations to your clients, too.
Oh, yeah.
Because, I mean, we had one that came up for, I think, $89,000, and someone wanted to put an offer in for $70,000. Again, no offense if you're listening to this. It's all good. We had a conversation about it. But I think they were like, man, we got to get this thing in writing. Let's get this thing in. I'm kind of like, man, let's just reach out and see if it's even worth putting in an offer at $19,000 under an $89,000 house, you know what I mean? And it went with tons of offers, well over ask, you know what I mean? No contingencies. So that's the other thing, is the expectations, because either whether you want to flip or whether you're the realtor that's helping the flipper, you have to figure out what the expectation is for what they want to make too. Because a lot of times the flippers are like, well, I want to make $100,000 off of it. Like, and this is real. This is like realistic. Now, are there flips we make $100,000 on? Yes. But when they're looking at a house in MLS and there's 12 other offers on it, there's probably a lot of offers in there where that guy's not trying to make $100,000. You know what I mean? Or maybe there's some contractors in there that are like going to contract the work themselves as well. Or you got people like me that can save some money on some realtor fees. So we're already shaving some of our costs, and we're coming to our $30,000, $40,000 in profit. For that guy that's okay with taking 15 or 20, like, he's going to outbeat me. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But if your goal is like 100, like, you need to set realistic expectations, or you need to find a way to find deals well off market so that you can just rip people off for the most part.
I think a lot of times people they set a number in their head and they don't know what that number is based on. We had a conversation with a gentleman not too long ago, and he was like, I'm looking to make, let's $80,000. And we were just like, I mean, that's not a realistic thing to think about. I was like, everyone else is kind of looking like, if you're making 11%, that's amazing. But what you're looking to do is so out of the park. So.
And you have 5 times less the cash necessary to fulfill these. So like and you may be the bad guy sometimes as the realtor. Sure. You may be like the guy that's like, hey, I know
the wet blanket.
I know these other realtors aren't telling you this because they don't flip, they don't have rental, and they just want to sale and they're desperate. But like, I'm not going to run you around to feel like I'm doing a good job for you when we're actually just tricking you into thinking that you're going to get a house. Like, that's not how it works.
So what's the in a kitchen or bathroom, master bath or whatever, when someone dumps in a bunch of money? Because I've been in houses where it's like, oh, this is like
way nice.
Yeah, way nice, and they think they're gonna swing for the fences and get, just because the kitchen's amazing.
I mean, I know people that have put $100,000 into kitchens, and I know people that have put $30,000, $40,000 into bathrooms. Actually, even more, $65,000. I think someone told me they paid for a bathroom the other day. I think she got mad at me for being like, wow. But it's just crazy.
It wasn't a nice wow.
It was like a wow. I wish I had known you back then. You know what I mean? Like, it wasn't anything against her.
I could have did it for 50.
yeah.
Like, oh man, I would have saved you 10,000.
Yeah, easily, and then pocketed 40. Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, are there differentials in kitchens and flips and stuff? Yes, but you got to think about what quality of house you're flipping. If you're flipping $1 million home, then yeah, maybe you need a spring for some higher end appliances, or some Carrera marble, or some higher end cabinetry. But for the most part, if you're even up to honestly $500,000, really, because when you go into a $500,000 new build right now, what are you getting? LVP floors still, you know what I mean? Like, you're not even getting hardwood anymore at LVP. Like, you're gonna get shaker cabinets sometimes, easy closed doors, easy closed drawers, and you can get that like Lowe's off the shelf, honestly, and they're like all hardwood. They're not bad cabinets. So if you were to say, hey, I can spend $3,000 in cabinets, or I can spend $15,000 in cabinets, am I going to get another $11,000 back on this house flip? No, because the comp's going to remain the same. Or if I think, hey, I could spend $1,700 on some nice granite, or I could spend $6,000 on Carrera, marble or quartz, right? Quartzite, whatever. Am I going to get the money back on it? No. So again, if you're a consumer and you want quartz in your house because it's the nicest and prettiest thing,
and that's
great.
What you want.
That's good. Not a big deal. If you're flipping, then obviously there's the cost versus return aspect.
It's all about quality. You want to have good quality, but the quality also means, did you lose a bunch of money? Is it the work? Does it make sense? And that kind of goes into the idea of like where the realtor versus, or where someone like our team can kind of help someone identify where you need to be. We'll identify the neighborhoods depending on, we can tell you what the ARV should be.
Yep.
And then I put the last thing is, which I always think is very interesting. You talked about a lot of professional flippers will hire realtors to help them with these things. And at the same time, I see people who try to sell their houses on their own and they don't hire a realtor. And I always thought to myself, I'm like, if this person whose job is to flip this house and sell it as quick as possible for the most money, and he gets a realtor, and you are just a layman, you're just a guy trying to sell your own house, and you don't do it. I'm like, do you see the difference there? You see the issue there? I'm like, this guy's paying because he understands it. It's like you weep for some of the first sale by owners because you're like, you're not seeing what we're all seeing.
But you also realize that everybody has their process in the process, right? Like, that's the thing. Like, the realtor has their job, just like the plumber has their job and the electrician has their job. Nobody comes in and says, well, I'm going to just, I'm just going to do everything. I'm going to be the realtor. I'm going to plumb it. I'm going to do my, I mean, maybe if you're the class A and you're just a ridiculous handyman, but even most of the contractors we deal with, you know what I mean? Like, contractors. I mean, I've got people that can do a lot of stuff, but if you're like, hey, replumb the house, they're still like, well, I got a plumber I'm going to bring in, or I got to let. So, well, the realtor's the same piece. You're still adding that piece to pull that out and really rob yourself of 5-10% that you're going to make selling. Just doesn't make sense.
You're going to end up with camera phone pictures.
Yeah, exactly.
So I know that was a lot for anyone, but I thought that was just like a nice way to kind of like give someone just a little bit of insight of what is going on with flipping a house, top down looking. And
I'd say the last thing probably is you got to figure out how extensive you want to get into what your first flip is going to be, or any flip. Like, I've flipped tons of houses now, and I still want to shoot myself every time I get into one where I need permits, plans, and like everything. Because like, why did I do this? Like, every time I get in and then I'm dealing with the counties failing me, and I'm dealing with the plan changes, or they're like, oh, we'll just get the change. Like, it's fine, just get them to stamp the change. And you're like, great, well, how long will that take? They're like, 10 weeks. So you're like, so I can just pay a contractor to come fix it to go per the plan for X amount of dollars, or I'll wait 8 to 10 weeks to change. Like, it doesn't. I hate it. So
that's why the other day you were like, Galen, if I ever go into a flip and it has a lot of permits, just stop me right then. I was like, all right, I'll write that down.
I mean, because he likes a challenge.
I mean, it's just, and when it comes together, it's going to be great. And like Greenway is finally getting to the point where it's like, oh God, it's not raining in the house anymore. Like, we've closed it off. The
I probably
windows
wouldn't
are
even
shut.
recognize it because I went like in the beginning. I mean, it's like I'm very eager to see what it looks like now.
I mean, we're quoting out all of our drywall and our insulation right now. So within the next 3 weeks, hopefully drywall will be in. And at that point, it's a brand new house. Like, once drywall in, it's like a whole nother thing. But until then, it's kind of whew. But you just got to figure out, like, man, try to find a house that just needs some flooring, some paint.
Start simple.
Light fixtures, kitchen. Heck, maybe you can even get one where the cabinets are nice and they just need to be refinished. Then you're just talking about stone. You're not talking about ripping out.
Spray the bathtubs. You don't have to like do a bunch.
That's it. Yeah. And then actually spraying the bathtubs is actually a really good idea, honestly, because if you have a nice bathtub that's not fiberglass, it's actually solid. You know what I mean? Yeah. Sometimes you don't need to spray them. Sometimes, like the one in Bon Air we just bought, that one's a nice tub. I'm just gonna pull the tile out and I'll retile. You know what I mean? But other than that, it's fine. I love Bon Air. Because keep in mind, if you've got old radiant heat and you want to go to heat pump, well, now you're pulling out all of the radiant baseboards. Now you're retrimming all the house. Lumber's up 200%, right? Or you need to do a kitchen. You're thinking, all right, I can rip out cabinets. That's not a big deal. But now, am I going to hire a kitchen company, or am I going to measure and then order the cabinets myself?
Your cabinets yourself.
Right? I mean, like, these are all little things. Like, you think it's not that big of a deal. Just call a contractor and he does it. No, they don't. That's not how this works. So, like, do you need recessed lights? Do you want recessed lights? Well, you got to wire that in. You need a permit for that. You're supposed to permit any added electrical, right? Are you moving plumbing? You're supposed to get a permit for that. So if you can get a house where you're not having to move plumbing around, you're not having to move electrical, you're not having to, pull mechanicals for heat pumps and things like that, you're not doing additions, it makes things much easier. And then also keep in mind big ticket items, HVAC, roof, siding, windows. These are all things that cost a lot of money. So if you're just doing interior like we are in Bon Air, I'm going to refinish the hardwoods, I'm going to put a kitchen in, put 2 baths in, paint it, put it back on the market, great. But if I needed siding and roofing and windows and HVAC, it would have added another, $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 worth of stuff, depending with how big that house is, right? So you also have to keep all of those things in mind. And then make sure you start building a Rolodex of people that do each and everything. Find a roofer, find a siding guy, find 2. That way you can compare some quotes once you buy. You can.
Or when one messes up, like, make sure you have multiple framers.
Yeah, because you fire a good amount of people in this business. You'll find, I've had painters lose all of the keys to my house. That's not a house. That's not a house problem, right? You can go vlog number 2, I think, flipping houses, right? Check that out on YouTube if you're watching this. The guy just lost all 3 keys, not 1 key, 3 keys, loses all of them, had to pay the locksmith to come out, re-drill it, put new locks on, held up like my job for like 3 or 4 days, and I had to find a new painter, obviously, right? You know what I mean? And so you're gonna have stuff like that, people framing things wrong, rot. I just, and sometimes you're not gonna inspect on these flips if you're buying sight unseen. But put your head into the crawl space before you buy a house.
Well, the other thing I was going to say is, and this is go along the lines of everything, and when it comes to real estate, is that no one is going to be in your head, so you have to like think ahead of hand before it actually happens. Like
ahead of hand, I like that.
Just. I would say
plan
ahead and think that they're not going to think like you.
Yeah. I mean, I'm thinking of like more and more stuff as I go. If you're, I mean,
call us.
We got to wrap this out. But even like home inspections, like people want to flip and they're like, well, I got to get a home inspection. And I think I used to do that. I used to be like, oh, I'll get an inspection. You don't need a home inspection. You're going to rip everything out. That guy, literally, if you're changing your outlets and you're changing the HVAC and you're changing the appliance, what is he going to find? So
he's like, I found a bunch of issues here. I'm like, well, I was going to destroy all of that anyways.
Yeah, so get used to like looking in the attic yourself, right? I'm going to look up. Do I see any leaks going on? What does the subfloor look like? Are there animals up here? What's the crawl like? Is there a vapor barrier? Is there mold? Is there mildew? Is it wet? Is there sitting water? Do all of that stuff yourself and then make a decision on if it's a good buy or not. That's all I got.
I love it.
All right. Well,
you guys have any questions, feel free to reach out to us. Jared, how do they reach out to you?
__ the Davis Group on Instagram, or if you just search the Davis Group at EXP anywhere. You can find us on YouTube. We've got a lot of people finding us on YouTube these days. You can find us on Facebook. Or you can call me, 804-536-6100.
You can always call me at 804-274-9016.
That's all you're going to give them?
That's my favorite one.
You don't want to give them anything else?
Nope.
All right. Well, that's another episode of RVA Real Estate Talk.
Google me, baby.
Thanks for listening.
If you have a real estate question that you would like to ask Jared or Galen, reach out to them at jared@centralvarealty.com or Galen at centralvarealty.com. Who knows? It may even be featured on an upcoming episode.